You see,
Okay.
can
Yes,
you see
we can see that fine.
Great.
Just to let you know, we're recording. So Vahid and Kevin, it's up to you if you want to keep your cameras on or if you want to switch them off. It's up to you.
Okay, thanks for having me. So I'll be talking briefly about qualitative research methods that are used in language testing research. Quickly moving on to the next. Whoop. Yeah, okay. So the outline would be, I'll be very briefly talking about how quantitative and qualitative research methods might differ, and some of the instruments, methodologies that are used in qualitative research, and some example studies, published studies we'll talk about, and some tips for qualitative parts of data collection analysis for your study, and some further reading. Okay, so quantitative versus qualitative. So as Vahid presented, statistics, quantitative methods are to generalize results. And this is appropriate for when you're exploring the factual data. So what we call like a what question. So what are the differences? What are the associations between different variables? So this is basically based on the assumption that the variables that you are looking into can be isolated and defined. Yeah, and when variables can be linked to form hypotheses before data collection. So, for example, quantitative methods, statistical methods can be very broadly grouped into two groups, I think. And one is to look into the differences between groups, like t-tests, ANOVA, that family. So differences in basically test scores between groups of people with different profiles, such as different proficiency levels, or maybe age, gender, motivation, etc., etc. All of these would be made into a variable, and then put into the analysis. So the other group would be to look into the associations between variables. So is there any associations or linear relationship between certain scores and certain strategy use, for example, or is there relationship between rate of severity, degree of rate of severity, and personality trait, etc., etc. So these can also be defined and can be linked to form hypotheses. So you would have a hypothesis to test using the statistical methods. So quantitative research methods are very useful in doing that. Whereas qualitative methods are basically used to collect perceptions, experience, views, processes from individuals' point of view. And these are quite useful in exploring why certain things are done in certain way, or why people felt this way, that way, etc., or how things have been done. So data are usually not really amenable to counting or measuring, as in quantitative research methods. So for example, things like what do raters pay attention to when rating this, rating essays, and what test takers at different proficiency levels do while reading passages for writing, or how test preparation practice match the intended washback of the test. So all of these are quite difficult to clearly define as variables and submit to quantitative analysis. So in order to look at processes, perceptions, experience, qualitative methods come into its full use. So this is a list of some main qualitative research methods. This is not exhaustive at all, but to just mention focus group discussions to collect some people's point of views within small groups. So for investigating maybe collective beliefs, attitudes, etc. And there is also one-to-one interviews. So you would be the interviewer and there's going to be interviewee to understand a personal perspective or experience more in depth. This can often accompany by, if you ask test takers to perform a speaking test, or maybe a writing task, you can record what they do and then play it back to them afterwards and ask about, what were you doing? What were you thinking when you were doing this, etc., etc. So you can have, stimuli, what is called stimuli, to remind people what they have done before the interview, to make it more easier for them to recall the processes if you're interested in looking into processes and strategies. And there are also CRELLA protocols. This is unlike this ad hoc interviews. This is like concurrently doing doing data collection as they complete a task. So, for example, participants report what's on their mind as they engage in a task. So if they're given a reading passage, they will read the passage as well as they report what they're thinking. So, okay, I read this sentence and I think this is not grammatical because etc. etc. So participants need to report what's on their mind, which is quite a difficult task if you think about it. So if you want to do this, definitely participants will need training in doing that. Fourth one, document analysis. This is also qualitative. So if you want to look into what are the official published knowledge that is spread among people, such as government reports, or if you're looking into some washback studies, looking into like course syllabus materials, school policy materials, etc., media articles, so you need to do this document analysis in order to know, so what do people know and what are the official policies in this? Observation notes. So if you want to have a third person point of view on, for example, let's say spoken interaction between an interviewer and interviewee, you would be sat there and then taking notes. Obviously, there are observe facts and stuff that you need to take into account. But this is also a useful way to collect data. And then finally, discourse analysis. You would probably, if you're interested in like speaking research, you would probably have read something about discourse analysis. This is to capture the characteristics of test taker performance. So, for example, how similar are the real life interactions to the test interaction that happens in speaking tests, things like that. And your conversation analysis, CAF analysis are all parts of discourse analysis to really trying to make generalizations about what the discourses look like. And there are many more, but these are, I think, quite often used in language testing research. Okay, just to take you through some examples of qualitative study. So Davidson, this is basically published online first with language testing. So Davidson in Press. So he explored the criteria that 18 medical doctors used to judge responses on the writing part of the occupational English test. Occupational English test is an Australian test for medical professions. So the writing task was to write a referral letter based on patients' notes. And these 18 doctors were asked to give judgments of the levels to these various patients, the referral letters. So the levels were unsatisfactory, not yet competent, competent, and strong. And also he had in between levels that it's not quite unsatisfactory, but not yet competent. So in between levels. So they had quite a lot of level adjustment to make. And in addition to that, 5 doctors out of these 18 produced a think aloud protocol. So they were reporting what they were thinking as they were giving judgments. And these comments were transcribed and thematically coded. So thematically coded means so you would look for common features under themes from different doctors. So one doctor maybe comments on not too badly organized, these essays, but it would be nice for them to be clearer with reasons for referral and state their concerns up front. So it's basically this commentator saying that it's important to have this to project this discourse first in front, up front, as a referral letter. So Davidson basically coded this comment under the themes of discourse structure and prioritizing. So these themes Davidson came up while looking at the comments, and there were many more, and you can read his paper what kind of other stuff they came up with. But so this is part of the this is an example of qualitative study. So it's only involving 18 doctors, and also only 5 doctors produce think aloud protocol. But it's quite well done, and it's a really neat study. So if you're interested in doing thematical analysis based on some interview data or think about protocol data, I highly recommend it. So example 2, qualitative study, another qualitative study by Wang, 2017, and this is published in Language Assessment Quarterly. So the title is A Chinese EFL Teacher's Classroom Assessment Practices, which is I displayed at the bottom. So this is quite interesting because this is a case study of how just one experienced EFL teacher assessed her students in a public speaking English course at the university in China. So basically, she traced one experienced EFL teacher in the classroom for the whole semester. And what she analyzed was basically document analysis, like the policy documents, course materials, use classroom observation to see what is done in the classroom, as well as recording, and interviews to the teachers as well as students, and also collected student journals. Now, if I just write this, in 2 sentences, it really looks neat. But if you imagine how much of data she actually collected and needed to submit to qualitative study, it's a massive project. I think this is her PhD thesis. So yeah, that must have been a really, really time-consuming and quite meticulous qualitative research that she's conducted. So basically, she was looking into how classroom assessment was implemented within the classroom, and also how the teacher and students perceived various aspects of the course. So that's, yeah, quite a lot of data, but just one experienced teacher, and it's a case study, but it can also form a very useful piece of information, collectively. And yeah, I think she was basically finding that this teacher was using assessment for learning in the classroom and assessment of learning as a summative assessment, and quite in a mixed skilled way. So yeah, if you're interested in a case study type of qualitative study, I highly recommend it. Okay. So now we've looked at 2 example qualitative research, and there are weaknesses, as well as the quantitative research methods have weaknesses as well. So what are they? So quantitative research methods, although they're really powerful and they can generalize the trends and present it very neatly, is actually weak in understanding the context or setting in which people do things. So the voices of participants are not directly heard in quantitative research. Whereas qualitative research can do that, but it can be seen as deficient because of the personal interpretations made of it by the researcher, so it's quite subjective. The potential bias created by this, and the difficulty in generalizing findings because it only involves small sample size. So so those are the points that the qualitative research tends to be attacked on. So what will be useful is to mix these 2, so as to compensate the strength and weaknesses of quantitative and qualitative methods, because the combination of methods will allow you to exploit the strength of a particular method, but because you have the other methods, you don't have to be attacked by the shortcomings of just one method. And it gives you a more complete picture by using different methods and different sources to observe and report on the phenomenon. Okay, very quickly, example 3, mixed method study that was done by myself and my colleague Daniel Lam. This was on the TOEFL IBT speaking, lecture listening into speaking tasks. So operationally, its planning time is 20 seconds, and we wanted to see the effects if the 20 seconds was extended to 90 seconds. We recruited 70 participants at higher and lower proficiency levels. So in terms of, we were looking at the effects, the potential effects of extended planning time in the overall analytic scores and the spoken performance in terms of the syntactic complexity, lexical complexity, accuracy and fluency, and also how the idea units were reproduced. We also looked at test takers' self-reported use of strategies and processes. To summarize the results, no effects on scores or linguistic performance, which is a bit less exciting than it can be, but it's okay. It was finding it on its own. And despite more planning for language and mental rehearsal with higher level test takers were found. So what was mixed method? Basically, the green is the quantitative part and the red is the qualitative part. So for the overall analysis of the scores was done by statistical comparison of test scores and linguistic performance. Firstly, we were coding quite qualitatively the performance transcripts and then counted different variables and then submitted to statistical analysis for trends. And then the third one, test taker self-reported use of strategy and processes, we submitted to statistical analysis, and also for interview transcripts, we coded using the thematic analysis. So yeah, if you're interested, it's free access through ETS reports. So yeah, please have a look. Stimuli, by the way, that we used for the simulated recall interview was this note-taking videos that we had in front of their hand and the notes. So you know, for candidates who was right-handed, it had to be on the right hand, and then if they were left-handed, it had to be on the left-hand side, and we taped the notes so that it doesn't go everywhere. So yeah, all these details are quite important to be worked out actually. So this video was replayed and stopped, you know, on regular intervals, and we asked participants to report. So what was on your mind when you wrote this down, that kind of thing. So that was how the simulated recall interview was done. Okay, it was quite interesting, and so very quickly, tips for qualitative data collection. If you're using mixed methods, yeah, qualitative parts of data collection analysis. So it takes a lot of thinking and preparation beforehand, like anything else. So main key, what do I really want to know? You know, what can quantitative analysis tell me? What needs to be explored qualitatively? And what is the best way to collect data? So what can be asked in a questionnaire? So relatively straightforwardly, and what should be explored more in details in interviews and other means. And how do I select suitable participants? In PhD studies, it's really important to think about the practicality. So who do I actually have access to, or who can give me access to suitable participants? You know, how many can I get, etc., etc. So it's always a balancing act of, you know, the ideal sample size and ideal profiles of the participants and what you can actually get access to. And how do I develop good questions for questionnaires and interviews? Now, this really, I recommend strongly to read guidebooks, yeah, on this, because there are quite an art to being able to develop good questions for questionnaires and interviews. And you need to pilot them once you've developed it with at least maybe 2 friends or colleagues to see if it really works, if there's no ambiguity, etc. And yes, you really need to think about how you're going to analyze the data beforehand. How will I analyze data? So in the previous studies on similar topics, what kind of coding schemes were used and what kind of themes emerged? You have to have some ideas, at least, of, you know, what kind of things you're going to do, what things you might find. And the qualitative part of the data analysis would take time, and it will be iterative. So yeah, you're going to need to be prepared to spend a lot of time on it. So which softwares to use? So there are quite a lot of softwares for qualitative data analysis. So Atlas TI and Vivo, MaxQDA, Qualcoda, RQDA, etc., etc. If you're considering it, check your university's subscription, because it's likely that your university has purchased like a university-wide license for one of these. And also consider the types of data. Is it only textual? If it's only textual, maybe you don't need like a full-on software like NVivo. Or do you want to code parts of video clips and audio recordings like separately from the transcripts? Then yeah, but you really need to do the research as well. That okay, can I just do it with Excel? You know, just do tabulating, simple tabulating might do in some cases. So yeah, you need to really think about it and also ask for advice from your supervisor. And yeah, am I coding data reliably? Coding reliability is a must to be reported. So coding reliability by double coding, asking somebody else to do part of the coding as well, or recoding by yourself parts of the data. And yeah, tips Start transcribing coding in good time. If you conducted a questionnaire and interview, it needs to be transcribed as soon as possible afterwards, because otherwise you're going to forget. And save and backup data. That really applies to all the aspects of PhD postgraduate studies. But yeah, really, it's an intense workload that you're forcing your PC to do. So yeah, you really need to be backing up data like doubly, triply. Okay, so quickly further reading. So there are many good books about mixed methods research or qualitative research or research methods in SALA. So yeah, have a look and yeah, enjoy your qualitative research part of the data analysis and collection. Okay, I think that's it from me. Sorry, I've run over a little bit. Sorry.
Brilliant.